and tell them that I was late.
Not at all.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Is that okay? Can you all hear me if I put it there? Everyone fine? I thought I'm going to speak for about 45 minutes and then have some questions and answers, because I'm sure there's a bunch of questions you might have that I won't get to, and maybe I can try to help you answer them. And if there's not a lot of questions, then I'll keep talking on some of the stuff which I find quite interesting. Yes, 4 or 5 years ago, I wrote a book about Eskom after writing about Eskom as a journalist for about 10 years. Because at the time we were kind of heading into a better season with a new CEO, Brian Molefe, had been appointed, and it looked like things were improving. I still looked forward to the work Molefe would have done, but in hindsight, sadly, the wheels also came off. But yeah, in the book, not punting the book, just explaining that there were clear signs and warnings that one laid out and said that if certain things don't happen, things are going to get worse. We'll see stage 4, 5, 6, which I predicted in the book, and lo and behold, last year we saw stage 4 as well as stage 6. So that's where we are. That's a picture of the Titanic, of course. That's a little bit about me and some of the other books that I wrote. So as I mentioned, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a technical expert, but I've decided to go into some of the technical issues, because we all ask, what the hell is going on here? You know, how is Eskom not able to keep the power stations going? What are some of the issues? That photo, that's the new CEO of Eskom, Mr. Andre de Ruyter. This was taken quite recently. He's walking the shop floor at Duva Power Station. It's nice for a change to see a CEO of Eskom actually walking this floor and finding out what's going on. Duva is one of the older power stations, coal-fired power station. Just reminded me of a story of when the devil visited Cape Town a while ago. Walks down Long Street, and nobody recognizes him. And after a while, he's getting irritated because he's the devil, and he's tapping a guy on the shoulder, and he says, "Hello, do you know who I am?" And the chap says, "No, I don't." And the devil says, "Really? You don't know who I am?" So the guy says, "Well, give me a clue." And the devil says, "Well, they call me the Prince of Darkness." And the guy says, "Are you the CEO of Eskom?" Speaking about Eskom, this is what I'm going to be talking about broadly, the burning platform, which is the picture, of course, the immediate crisis, what's going on right now. That was my book that I did in 2015. Some background just about general electricity matters in South Africa for those of you who might not be experts. Let me have an idea. Anybody with some real background or a bit of background in Eskom to get an idea of whether... Okay, so they might not that much. One who's uncertain and unsure, but that's okay. Okay, it helps me so that if I make things quite simple, maybe I sit in front of a room full of engineers. I don't know. Background: Eskom's biggest problems and some of the road ahead. So the burning platform, 2019, last year calendar year was the worst year we've had with load shedding. Estimated cost 120 billion. Just the load shedding. So this excludes all the indirect costs, the loss of investment, the reputational damage we've taken, the loss of jobs that won't be created. I mean, this is just a real estimated cost of undelivered electricity, 120 billion estimated cost. Again, I'm saying that depending on key decisions, we can expect similar things for the next 2 to 3 years, at least, if not longer. So what is one of our problems? And this is to give you an idea of the impact. 2009, load shedding really started 2008 January. And 2018, that was the projected GDP growth for South Africa. This is where we've gone. And we keep going down. I mean, that's terrifying in a country with the massive challenges that we've got. And now we've got an electricity problem. I think we can be under no illusion this is the greatest challenge South Africa's had in democratic South Africa, the electricity challenge. If you don't have electricity, we can kiss economic growth goodbye. We can kiss investment goodbye. It's just a simple fact. And I can't stress it enough what a serious problem this is. But some still think we can fiddle while Rome is burning. The Eskom supply simply can't keep up. We're looking at an average power plant age of 37 years. I think I'll get into that a bit later. I might chop and change between the slides, I'm sorry. So an average power plant age of 37 years. Imagine, how many of you have got cars that are older than 5 years? Put your hands up. Older than 5 years. Good for all of you. How many of you have got cars that's older than 20 years? So maybe 4 or 5. How many's got cars older than 30 years? Well done. Okay. No, that's more than I expected, about 3. So here's the point. You'll agree. Do you drive those cars that are older than 30 years at 180, 190 kilometers an hour continuously for 7 days a week? What will happen? Do you service those cars regularly? Do you change the oil, the filters? Of course you do. Never mind doing those basic things. 37 years on average of these power plants' age, you need serious replacements of huge components, perhaps a complete engine overhaul, a new engine. The body of that vehicle is fragile. If you're going to be driving it at 180, 190 kilometers an hour, which it wasn't designed for 37 years ago, this thing's going to start rattling and popping rivets and falling apart. This is what's been happening. We've had the plant has been run beyond what it was made for, and now we are dealing with the sak patats. I'll explain to you in a bit about why they thought that we could actually get away with doing this. So energy availability factor is, Eskom has an installed capacity of about 46,000 megawatts. 46,000 megawatts. That's all the power plants. It's about 30 power plants, 85% of them coal-fired, fueled by coal. So 46,000 megawatts. Electricity availability factor says how much of that is available, how much of that can we rely on to actually give us electricity. Here's the 2000, here's 2030 projected, so we're more or less here. So it was above 90, it was about 95% of the plant worked well and could be relied upon in 2000. Obviously before it was similar, and this has plummeted steadily. Last year the average was 67%. So only about 30,000 megawatts can be relied upon to provide electricity. The country demand was about 30,000 megawatts. So you can see there's no room for error. Now bear in mind, you need to have power units that are offline for maintenance at the same time, planned maintenance. So even though you might have 30,000 that you can rely on, about 6,000 to 7,000 of that is offline for planned maintenance. It must be done. And now you're starting to be hit with unplanned maintenance, which is where we're starting to move into the serious load shedding situation. So there's literally no room for error. This 67% on average for last year is historically the lowest it's ever been. It's horrific, it's terrible, it's something we should all pray about. The IRP plan, which government has took their time to finally release, it was released October last year, says that we have to manage this back up to 75% over there by 2025 or earlier, I think, if we want to meet the expected energy demand. So all of our plants should be performing at 75%. I have my doubts whether we're ever going to get there. A recent study done by the CSIR says that they're projecting we're actually going to be going there. This is accurate, I believe, given that at the end of 2019, bear in mind that's the average, end of 2019, beginning of this year, we were below 60%.
Why was that uptick there in 2017?
Well, that's a good question. Can you hold that question till the end? Because I'm going to get to that question. It's a good question. It's an anomaly. It might have been the way they were measuring things. This data comes from Eskom. We're relying on that. At the time, there were Brian Molefe and Mr. Machela Koko, I'm sure you've heard the name, were involved there. And this is their big defense, saying that they were not involved in state capture, etc., corruption, because the numbers looked better. The opposite being told by Pravin Gordhan. Sorry, I'm answering your question now. Pravin Gordhan says that they were running the plant so hard. If you run the plant, instead of taking it offline for an oil change and a simple plan, which you should do, they were running it very hard, which means they were gambling, saying that these plants won't trip, but we're not taking anything offline, and then your availability goes up. But you're actually messing it up longer term, if that makes sense. So if you reduce your planned maintenance, you can improve your unplanned, you can improve your electricity availability. There was a question. Okay. Yes, yeah, and it's been going down, which proves the point that if you don't maintain those things, we might have been sitting there or wherever, but now we're down there. Am I going too fast? Everyone okay? All right. So,
well, I'm quite curious to know why
I'll get to that in a bit, ma'am. I will tackle that for you. This is to give you an idea of week-on-week availability factor comparisons for those 4 years. As you can see, it's been on the purple down here is 2019. So this is where we were at the end of 2019, below 60%. It's horrific. It really is quite bad. So all the energy plans that Eskom's got, predictions, etc., says we need to be at least above 72% to ensure no load shedding. We are on average 67%, and we were dropping below 60%, to give you an idea of where we actually are. So yeah, just the example again, why are we being load shed? So load shedding is a very good thing. It's critical. I don't know, I can't overemphasize it enough again. If we are being load shed to ensure the whole grid doesn't collapse. Because if you've got 20 different implements plugged into one plug, what happens? Your house just trips. So load shedding, you remove a lot of those plugs very quickly, and the house is, your supply levels out, and the house the main doesn't trip, essentially. If this country's main switch has to trip, which means a blackout, which means all the power stations go offline, which happens if the power frequencies aren't kept at a certain level, it's a few hertz, megahertz, then we've got a blackout. Then you'll have to physically restart every power station, black start, like literally jump starting your car. You explain to me how you jumpstart a 4,800 megawatt power plant. You're not going to do it with a bucky or a tractor. We don't have regional colleagues, neighbors who can do it for us. So and if we have a blackout, that will be catastrophic. We're talking about 3 months without no power. Imagine that. You won't be able to draw cash within 24 to 48 hours. No credit card facility, cell phone, nothing will work within 24 hours. How are you going to buy food? How are you going to keep anything cold? What are you going to do in hospitals? Soon the diesel stocks will run out. We're talking about weeks, if not months. So a blackout is catastrophic. It must be avoided, and that's why we're being load shed. And the load shedding team at Eskom, I can tell you, they're not palookas. They're the best in the world. They're load shedding us very well and very nicely. So don't be too mad at them. It means they are actually sitting there and monitoring the system and ensuring that we don't really go down the abyss. So this, I think, is self-explanatory. We've got about 46,000. You've got your planned out maintenance, which should be more, by the way, because the plant is 37 years of age on average. And then this is the levels we've been seeing in the past 3 to 4 months. 14,000 megawatts and more. You'll read about it. Unplanned outages, they call it. So that's unexpected. It's a unit just trips for whatever. I'll get into some of that a bit later. And then, so you're more or less there, available, but your demand might be there, so you have to be load shed immediately. And obviously, it gets worse the more the demand picks up. Some background, South Africa, Eskom is the absolute monopoly. 95% of all our electricity in the country is generated by Eskom, which is another part of our problem. We have nothing else to rely on. We don't have a regional grid to rely on, like people do in Germany or France. 30 power stations. This is, I think, 2018, so it's slightly different. Doesn't matter. Of which about 85% of all the electricity is generated by coal. So anybody who thinks that we can move away from coal needs to open their eyes. I think there's so many of these arguments which a lot of the, and I'm all for the environment and the climate and all that stuff, but we also have to be realists. And the realistic fact is 85% of our electricity comes from coal. It's a fact. If we close that down, how are we going to replace that? About 1,900 megawatts from nuclear, and then we've got some other bits and bobs. But by far the mass comes from coal. This is just a graph of where the rest of it comes from. The other 5%, it's basically Sasol that provides a lot of its own fuel and one or two other entities. So some of the major problems. This is an example of what happened between 2007 and 2019. So you've had 13 CEOs in 12 years. That includes acting. 13. You've had 6 boards, so that's about 60 different people. You've had 8 chairmen, no chairwomen. Now, imagine for a moment a family, a household, and there's been 13 different fathers in 12 years. Can you imagine the instability? I'm sure you can think of it for yourself. You can't plan ahead, you can't think ahead, you can't see plans through. Every new guy brings his own people, he changes everything. 13 different CEOs in 12 years. I don't think there's a company in the world, small or big, that's operated like this ever. And this is a critical key thing to our economy. How has that happened? Look, I am not political. I'm not a member of a political party, but I work in the Western Cape government as an official. I want to just make that clear. But so when I criticize the ANC, it's because the ANC is the ruling party. And because they're the ruling party, they hold the majority in parliament. So appointing boards, you can't do anything if the ANC doesn't want it to be done. And we've seen similar things in all the parastatals. We've seen people like Claudia Motsoeneng at SABC, Dudu Mjeni at SAA get away with gross, at the very least, negligence, incompetence for decades. And we are now sitting with a gebakte pere. Electricity sales, to give you another indication, has gone down in that same period. So Eskom is selling less by 4.5%. That sounds little. It's huge. If you think this is a 12-year period, it should have been it should have been around at least 250,000 gigawatts by now if the economy was going well. We're at 208 and going down, which means the economy is not growing. Everything that can use electricity is moving away from electricity. Average electricity price, by my estimation, has gone up in this period 500%. It sounds crazy, it sounds impossible. I can assure you it's more or less accurate. It includes the tariffs added on by your municipalities. So that's why I said it's more or less an average, but it's more or less accurate. 500%. So here's another problem, coal costs. So primary energy costs, I've explained to you, about 85% of all the power comes from coal-fired power stations, so you need a lot of coal. 2007, Eskom was spending 10 billion rand a year on coal. 2019, 58.5 billion. It's gone up 485%. Big part of that has been beneficiation. In the past, they used to have long-term contracts with big mines built as close to power plants as possible, because transport is a problem. You are moving in thousands and thousands of tons of coal per day. It's just logic again. You had conveyor belts running to power plants, taking the coal directly to the power plants. A lot of that's been done away with. People have called it, shall we say, radical groups, and shall we say, even liberal movements within the ANC, that these evergreen contracts must go away, etc., white monopoly capital, all of the excuses. And the reality is that this is what has happened to the coal price. It's gone through the roof, and in addition, so all of that coal is trucked in. Well, not all of it, but by far a big move has been shifted to trucks. So the roads are being destroyed in places like in Mpumalanga. It's been the case for a long time. And you are also being held hostage by the vagaries in these little companies. So if they feel they're not getting their cut, there's very often industrial action, which leads to blockages at coal power stations, which isn't getting the coal they need. And the other problem is, where does the coal come from and what does it look like? So these are some of the numbers. So Eskom's biggest problems. Pardon? Yes, no, we don't import coal. South Africa is a coal-rich country, absolutely coal-rich. We've got lots of coal, but it's not being developed anymore. So we haven't opened a new coal mine in more than 15 years. So we are now running out of coal as well. And there's no movement. 10 years ago, Eskom said we need to open 10 new coal mines, and we need to do it now. Our coal-fired power stations must last at least, Medupi Kusile, at least another 60 years. We're running out of coal. So now people are scrambling around with little trucks, finding coal anywhere they can and coming and delivering it by the ton. And so the quality quality checks you can do on all of these different trucks coming in, of course, there are problems. But by far the biggest problem now is the debt problem, the money problem. Eskom is bankrupt. The only reason they're still standing is because the government is standing behind them and sort of saying, look, we'll make sure they don't drop keel over. But the debt problem is enormous. Let me first ask, you all know how much 1 billion rand is? 1,000 million? 1,000 million is 1 billion. And I hope I get this right to give you some perspective. If you have 1 million rand and you give away 10,000 rand a day, it's 100 days. 100 days, 1 million rand gone. 1 billion is something like 12.5 years if you give away 10,000 rand a day. It's incredible. And we forget sometimes the scale of 1 billion. We all hear billions all the time. What's another billion? And I think in Parliament it's the same problem. It's, what's another 2 billion, 1 billion? Come on, 100 million, it's nothing. It's nothing. The debt, as I mentioned, 40.5 billion in 27, 2019, 454 billion. It's an insane amount. Interest payments this year alone will be 38 billion. Now bear in mind, last year Eskom made a loss of 21 billion rand. Can you put the numbers together? The severity of this problem? Plus, as I showed you just shortly here, they are selling, no, I'm at the wrong one, sorry. This is the amount of electricity sales. So that was what was projected to be, and so that's where we are. They are selling less. So they're selling less for much more, and they're still making a 21 billion loss. The numbers are mind-boggling. I want you to take a moment and just think about it again. Gautrain, the entire Gautrain project cost about 30 billion. The entire Gautrain project, about 30 billion. Here we are talking about a loss, a 1 year loss of 21 billion, interest payments of 38 billion, and the hole is so big, there's still no chance that they're going to get out of this. So what led to the biggest reason for this debt was building 2 new power stations. Medupi and Kusile power stations started 2007, 2008. Kusile should have been done by 2015. That was the original promise. Medupi 2013. They thought it was going to take 5 years odd. That's Medupi. It's in Ras, Lephalale. It's as hot as Hades. There's only a thin fence between the hell and Lephalale, and that fence is full of holes. So the point being, you need water as well for coal-fired power stations, and you build this thing in a place where there's hardly any water. Target date 2015. The date now is 2021, 2023 for the 2 power stations. So we're talking 15 to 16 years construction time. Now, also think that we're not currently starting to build any new big power stations. If we start today, it might take us 15 to 16 years. So what's going to fix our problem in the next 10 years? I don't want to depress all of you, so have a sip of water sometimes. The original cost estimate was 164 billion for the 2. And the current estimate is 451 billion. And I think it's going to go up a lot more. A lot more. Yeah, I agree. I think it's going to go up significantly. I think that they're underballing. A lot of these numbers here are dated 2014. We're not getting updated figures, including costs to fix the areas where there's real problems. Some real fixing is going to have to be done. And the cost of that, I don't think, is factored in there. Plus environmental issues. Don't forget, there's a big movement globally here as well that these plants are too polluting. So they've got to build something called a flue gas desulfurization, which takes out a lot of the particles, which costs another 30-odd billion on top. Plus the water problem. So they have to build a whole pipeline bringing water from the Crocodile River here. Unpaid accounts, so debt. So I showed you the costs have gone up about 500%. Doesn't matter, even if it went up. But if you look at the outstanding debtors, average debtors day now 83 days. Soweto owes 13 billion excluding interest, so it's about 19 billion including interest. Nothing's happened except Eskom. Soweto's entire debt was written off in 2003, so that's not apartheid debt. That's new debt that they've built up since 2003, and there's been hardly any action taken. Municipalities in total across the country, about 257 of them owe Eskom about 20 billion, projected to just keep increasing to 2020, 35 billion. I can say, because I do work with it proudly, that in the Western Cape we're not in arrears with Eskom, not 1 out of 30 municipalities. This is to give you an idea of the top debt owed, and you'll see Free State right at the top. Free State, and yesterday the new Secretary General of the ANC, Mr. Ace Magashula, or over the weekend stated that the ANC has decided that the state should now step up and consider allowing some municipalities who can't afford to pay a free pass. This is ANC decision taken over the weekend. Now I'm asking you one simple logical question again. What's the immediate effect? Every other municipality will say, then we're not paying anymore either. And then we say we're not paying for water anymore, or for anything. Why should we? Half of the municipalities in the Free State are getting a free ride. Isn't it a logical assumption? Such utter rubbish, you can't imagine people think this is a possibility. Plus, bear in mind, if I sound harsh, I don't have anything against people who are really struggling, and there are people who are struggling, which is why I'm so upset about Eskom not working. There is free basic electricity, up to 100 kilowatts hour per month per household already. So this debt is excluding that. So maintenance, We've heard us spoken about maintenance a bit. There's massive backlogs and poor maintenance that's been done at these power plants. As I mentioned, about 37 years on average, and Eskom's got no money. So what do they decide to do in their wisdom? We've got to reduce our costs. And there's a big cost drive now going on again. So what do you do to reduce costs? And if you are saying we're not cutting any personnel, Eskom staff in that period went up by about 12,000 people. There's 48,000 people working at Eskom today. I think in 2000 it was about 30. It's been estimated that there's about 15,000 too many people there. But so you can't cut people. The average salary is above 700,000 per person. I mean, it's crazy. Yes. No, bear in mind, just let me just point it out. It's a rough calculation based on total staff cost and total number of employees. So it's of course the lowest paid guy is not getting that, but the average number is crazy. And if you compare it, it's gone through the roof, and that's where I'm getting to. So it's above 700,000 rand on average per employee at Eskom. And we say, yeah. No, 700 a year. So it's about 60 a month. Yes. Go check me out. It's crazy. City Power, yes, City Power in Johannesburg is an independent, it belongs to the municipality. There's 1,700 people working at City Power, so City Power buys electricity from Eskom and distributes to half of Johannesburg. Same thing. Average salary there is worse. It's about 730 per year per person if you do that calculation. And it's estimated to go to 800 this year or something. Remember, people have been getting increases of 8% and more. This is a reality every year. So what do you do if you don't want to cut back on staff costs? Because it's not politically and ideologically convenient. You cut everywhere else. And one of this has been with maintenance. And the way they thought that they could get away with it was saying, well, we've got 2 new power plants, and these are the timelines. They're going to come online here, and here. This is going to give us the boost. So we just need to get there, and then we're going to be fine. And the problem is, those power plants, the new ones, haven't made those timelines, and the units that are there aren't working as they should. Their availability is even lower than what I've shown you. So that hasn't worked, and so now we're really in the dwang. The delays, and then substandard coal is a problem. That is a photo of rocks. This is some of the coal that, and this isn't a unique photo. This is some of the coal that's being sent to Eskom. So to give you an idea how a coal-fired power station works, I think it's interesting. I hope I'm not boring any of you. So this is quite interesting. So you don't just put coal into a power station. You have to grind it to dust, and then it's blown into the furnaces so that those turbines, and then you create steam. Okay? So that's a boiler. Medupi's is about 110 meters tall. There's 6 of them. So you get your coal. Your coal is taken into what's called a mill. It's crushed to a very fine dust. Now your problem is if you've got poor quality coal or you've got rocks, they don't crush as finely as they should. And this then ends up there in the boiler as well. Our coal in South Africa doesn't burn as easily and as well as coal elsewhere in the world. It's got higher ash content, and the weaker the coal quality is, the higher the ash content is. So when you finish burning that coal, you're sitting with ash, and that ash and that coal bits is going everywhere in that boiler, and then that sits and clogs up the workings in there. I'll show you what it looks like, and that's where a lot of our problems are coming from at the moment. I hope that explains a bit of it. From there's obviously steam is created there, which turns these turbines, which goes into a generator and gives us electricity. But the 2 points I want to highlight are this, the mill, and this bit over here, the boiler. So one of the issues that has been highlighted as a problem in the new power plants is a lot of one of the big problems with Medupi and Kusile is the government was warned 1998 at the very least. So the argument from the ANC and some that the whole mess is due to state capture is rubbish. That simply exacerbated the problem. The government knew from at least 1998 we are running out of electricity, we have to build more power stations. This is a fact. And then when they were load shed significantly in 2008 and end of 2007, but starting 2008, they decided, well, okay, hell, now we've got to build. Let's build quickly. Let's do it. No fully funded funding plan. The pre-engineering work wasn't even completed. They relied in some parts on old power station plants. Matimba power station, they used some of those plants to do it quicker, thinking we're going to do it faster if we do it like this. So one of the problems is that you get international guys to come and design and build your power plant. This is the mill, as I showed you, that's what crushes this coal. And as I mentioned, we need to crush our coal a lot finer because it takes longer to burn. So if it's the finer it is, the quicker it burns, the more reliable our electricity is. So the international guys, they have a different quality coal. They come and they design these, which are also cheaper. So Eskom said, fine, let's go for these. And this is, by the way, just a theory, my theory, that I'm working on. And they built vertical mills, which doesn't grind the coal as finely. Elsewhere in the world, it's not a problem because the coal burns fast, quickly, efficiently. But Eskom's older power stations all look like this. It's called a vertical tube, a horizontal tube mill, which crushes the coal a lot finer and ensures that you've got a much more reliable electricity that's being generated. And Eskom was initially looking at this, and then they were convinced to do it like this, and this is a massive problem at the moment. So it can't crush the coal as finely, and that's why the new plants aren't delivering the electricity that has been promised. And this is a nightmare if you have to replace this now. You can imagine the cost, but what can we do? So there are only certain things you can do, but this is one of the challenges. This is to give you an idea. I told you this is the boiler room, or the boiler of a coal-fired power station. It's about 110 meters tall at Medupi and Kusile. So that's a boiler tube. That's what it looks like when it's broken. So water runs inside those tubes, and it gets heated up by the coal that's blown in here. That's obviously extremely hot. And this boiler housing, over there is what's called the tube. So all of those tubes there is built over there. And an interesting thing, it's about 650 kilometers. Very finely laid tubes. Crazy, 650 kilometers. And think of it, with water running through it, which is heated up to generate the steam. Now, an interesting point is, that is built, one of the first things to be built. And then the whole boiler is put around it. So now you can imagine if there's a problem there, how you got to fix that. You've got to get into a little hole there. That's the only way you get into that boiler. And then build a whole construction to get there and then fix a leak in 650 kilometers worth of pipes. This gives you an idea of the significance of the challenge here. If you haven't done, so if you don't take a boiler offline religiously as per your plans, and you give it a 2 or 3 month overall where you check all of those tubes, you end up running it too hard and you see one breaks and it smashes the whole lot. And then the other problem I explained, if you've got too much ash, that also ends up on this stuff because there's a lot more ash flying around than it's been designed for. That is very corrosive, and that adds to the destroying all of this here. So that's some of the problems that they're dealing with. I hope that I'm not speaking too technically for you. Corruption, state capture, I said I didn't want to go into it too much, but let me give you a sobering thought. The NPA, the National Prosecuting Authority, with a new head, which is fantastic. I think she's great, but it's like putting, it's like telling the first officer on the Titanic, boom, you're now the captain. Good luck. And the iceberg is starting to hit you. If you're not going to be putting all your efforts into support her and others like her, and you're giving them free rein and budget to do what needs to be done, we are smoking our socks. This is last year, 2019, the SIU reported, and this is only the reported cases. I can assure you there are thousands of cases that don't even get reported. 293 cases of corruption to the NPA, only 9 were dealt with. So that's why we've got lots of people walking around with big mouths. Where are they? They're not charging me. They're not tackling me. These people are going on with business as if it, getting new jobs in different municipalities. These are only municipalities. This isn't even SOEs. And since 2016, not a single prosecutor's post has been filled. There's no money. 26% vacancy rate. I mean, I don't have to go into the skills issue. The Hawks, I wrote a book about Steinhoff. Marcus Jooste is traipsing around the winelands, care footloose and fancy free with all of his 3 billion pocketed offshore. Isn't it great? The Hawks don't have the Hawks are the police's priority crimes unit. They have a commercial crimes unit, which is even more sophisticated and amazing. They don't have one CA, forensic auditor, or specialist in those kind of financial crimes there. Not one. Not one. I think it's sick. The road ahead. Look, I don't want to depress all of you. I'm a realist, and I'm optimistic. I always am. I'm a realist, and we need to, start saying things like they are. So the road ahead. Bad news. Electricity will only increase. There's literally no other option. Government is going to have to bail out as well, but there's certainly going to be massive increases electricity-wise. And the interesting thing is, it's like a self-fulfilling prophecy, because the higher the tariffs go, the more people go off the grid and stop relying on Eskom. And these are generally people who can afford to pay and buy their own solar panels, etc. But they're also the same people who can pay Eskom. So Eskom is going to get even less money into its pocket the higher the tariffs go. There's no two ways about it. They're going to get even less money because the people who are paying them are going to start saying, we're doing our own thing now. So that's why when they talk about a death spiral, this is what's actually happening. And yeah, so that's a mess. There's inflation, by the way, over there, the red line. It's certainly going to go, the price is going to go up. Keeping the lights on, what are some of the options? Independent power producers. In the short term, there's no other options right now, even though ideologically there's still a lot of people, especially in the ANC and other parties, who think that it's a terrible thing. They've got no choice now. We have no electricity if we don't get stuff going very, very quickly. Some of these stuff could take 2 to 3 years. We're in trouble right now. So independent power producers are going to have to come to the party in a big way, and you're going to have to incentivize them. And I think that there's an Eskom board meeting coming up this week, and I think we're going to hear that. I don't know where they're going to get the money, but you're going to have to incentivize people to do it. And the other interesting thing is there are IPPs at the moment who've got wind turbines and solar farms or whatever around the country, and they've contracted to Eskom already, for example, whatever the case might be, 1,000 gigawatts a month, but they might have capacity for 2,000 gigawatts, but because they're more expensive than Eskom, government has been lax to get more electricity from them. So while we are being load shed and spending billions on diesel, billions, Eskom has been spending this financial year, which ends, I think, March, 6 billion on diesel, gone. So instead of that, Eskom government says, let's rather do that than give additional contracts to those IPPs. Yes, sir. No, there's a substitute power plants which run its turbines. There's at Ankerlig and in Mossel Bay, there's about 14 turbines of about 150 megawatts each that was built in 2007 very quickly. They can be done very quickly in a year or 2 years, and they run off diesel. But it's an insane amount. I think it's about, about 30 Rand a second or something, or it's something crazy to run them. And so they're actually meant to be used, 0.0% of the time. At the moment, they're being used about 5% of the time, just running diesel. And the crazy thing for me, again, we've got basically three wholesalers of diesel, and Eskom uses 2 of them, and not the third one, which is Chevron here. They use 2 of them and about 30 middlemen and women. It's a fact. And again, there's the additional cost. Instead of buying from a wholesaler, making sure the supply is guaranteed, it's cheaper. It's not happening. And of course, there are lots of names and links and diagrams you can do as to who owns what, where, and now. So diesel is we're going to burn a lot of diesel over the next year at the very least. Licenses to allow cities like Cape Town to build. So up till now, a place like Cape Town, we can't go out on the market and say, listen, who's got electricity that they can give us? Because we can only buy from Eskom. And you need special licenses and permission, and government just simply hasn't been coming to light with those licenses. Because they realize that the more cities are going to do this and start to stand on their own and be less reliant on Eskom, the bigger Eskom's problem is going to be. So it's like, let's rather do nothing. But we're literally heading into Cape Town's now in a court. They're going to be in court in May because they're challenging this. It's such an obvious thing that we have to do. Political will. Is the right political will there? So this gives you an idea of the complexity of who everybody's. There's so many chiefs. You've got energy, you've got public enterprises, who's the shareholder. You've got the regulator who decides, who kind of, because Eskom's a monopoly. Look, a monopoly is not a bad thing, in my view. If it's well managed, if it's well regulated, if it's well monitored, if it's delivering what it should, a monopoly is not a bad thing, and it could be ideologically great. It can be a great job creator. It can be a great creator of training, etc., which the public-private sector might not want to do. But if it's done like it's done here, it's a complete disaster. Then it's a big problem because you've got no alternative. And then you've got all of these other departments that have a role to play. You've got water and sanitation, environmental affairs. I mean, Eskom is paying about 7 billion a year in environmental taxes because they are using coal-fired power stations. But government doesn't give that 7 billion and say, yeah, Eskom, go and clean up your act. They're using it to fund whatever else they might be doing. Same with similar to the plastic bag levies that you might have been aware of. So it would be fine if that money goes to Eskom to help them fix their problem, but it's not. It's just another cost to the tariff that you and I are paying, which is making Eskom even more unsustainable. You've got the DTI, and then you've got National Treasury. That is the Minister of Energy, Mr. Gwede Mantashe, who seemed to think that we have no energy crisis relatively recently. Turnaround plan, so debt relief, at least 100 billion must be taken off Eskom's balance sheet. So that's probably going to happen. It has to happen. So what will happen is it will go to the government's balance sheet. It will reduce the pressure on Eskom, but it's just shifting. It's a little paper game. But it will help Eskom. Cost curtailment, 77 billion. They have to reduce costs. Where the hell are they going to do that? If they say we're not going to touch things like BE procurement, in fact, they say we have to increase that. And I'm all for empowerment. Don't misunderstand me, but you don't do it at the cost of the whole economy. It's completely insane. You've got to do the cheapest, best, fastest. Separation of Eskom into different entities. So that's one of the big plans that the government's got. Let's break Eskom up into 3 different parts. This is going to solve the problem. I have a simple question. What's going to happen to the debt? 450 billion. Even if they reduce it by 100, what's going to happen to the debt? Is it going to go away? Of course not. Is Eskom currently, with one board and one CEO and one chairman, being run well? No. So are we saying 3 different entities with 3 boards, 3 CEOs, 3 chairmen is going to make things better? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Some of the unknown issues which nobody wants to talk about is the debt owed. As I mentioned, except for the ANC, who believes that somehow we have to let municipalities not pay anymore. Or they say non-viable municipalities which don't have a tax base. I mean, that's basically every single one, more or less, outside the Western Cape. Staff costs, as I mentioned. There's going to have to be a restructuring. We can't promise, and this is what's happening. There will be no job cuts at SAA as well. I don't know what. And now you've got to understand, 48,000 people. It's not 48,000 engineers or 48,000 people that are actively able to fix the problems. It's generally not, because the skills that Eskom needs has to be contracted. It's been contracted in. And here's just an aside. Maybe I'll get to that. I'm running out of time a little bit. Let me get to that a bit later. About the skills, the welding skills, if you want me to tell you an interesting story. Future outlook. So we had this integrated plan which kind of predicts our future over the next 11 odd years to 2030. So you've got 2030 over there, and it kind of says that we are facing a shortfall of between 2,000 and 3,000 megawatts until 2022, which is more or less there. I think it's a lot bigger. So what they've said, because we're facing this problem, request for information was issued very abruptly, very quickly at the end of last year when they were caught with their pants down, saying, listen, quickly, who can provide us with this? Very quickly. So this end of January, we'll know who can do that. I don't know, it might be a few people. But just to give you an idea here, so there you've got nuclear. So according to this plan, 2024, Koeberg is our only nuclear power plant. It's kind of coming to its end of life. So they have to renew and refurbish it. And that's what their plan is, to do it. And it's absolutely critical, I think. And that's the plan. By 2024, it'll be renewed for another 20 years. So then we'll have Kuba, which could run for another 20 years. You've got coal there. So you've got, this is the other problem. A lot of these old plants are going to have to be closed down, decommissioned. So you've got the red bits there, all the ones that are going to be closed down. So I'm sorry it's a bit blurry, but we're talking about 10,000 megawatts that has to be shut down over the next 10 years of existing coal. We are building about, Medupi and Kusile is about, what's that? It's about 10,000 megawatts. So we're not even building enough to replace the ones we're decommissioning. To give you some more food for thought, we're looking at, hydro, we've got zero options. I want to tell you this little story about hydro. Over here, you'll see a number, 2,500 megawatts. There's a big fraught fist there, I think. And what that is, the government wants to buy electricity from the Congo. It's a place called Grand Inga. I don't know if you've heard of the name. Grand Inga has the potential. It has the potential to generate the entire sub-Saharan Africa off hydroelectricity. Like I have the potential to run in the Olympics in 2 years' time in the 100 meters. What's the laughter about? I could totally do it. No, you're right. I mean, I take the compliment, but there's absolutely no way. There's absolutely no way. Government is saying this is going to happen. You explain to me how we're going to be. That project hasn't even been started. There's a hell of a fight on the go. This is in the Congo. It's about, I think the number is 6,000 miles through about 4 countries. Where there's severe political instability in most of those countries, and we think we can rely on 2,500 megawatts to get here. I don't see how that happens, and yet this is in our plan, our official plan. We've got solar PV over there, so the thinking is that we're going to have, by 2030, we're going to have about 8,000 megawatt of installed solar capacity. Wind, about 17,800 megawatts capacity of wind. And then some other little bits and bobs. So wind will take up about 18% of the total capacity, solar about 6%, coal will drop to about 58%. Too many numbers, I'm sorry. But it's interesting. I'm going to tell you a little bit about wind and solar in a minute or two. CSIR again did a very recent study. They believe, as I do, that the shortfall might be a lot more. So I explained that we think that next 2 to 3 years we're going to be in trouble. They think we're going to be in more trouble than government wants to say. So as I pointed out earlier, this was the availability factor. We are trending here at the moment. We're trending here. So according to the official plan, this is the official plan, we're going to go there. I don't see any indication for that. Absolutely zero. Demand forecast, this is more on the good side if you don't like economic growth. The updated plans projects we're going to be going there, but we actually might be going there, if not even going even a bit worse. So it's simple. If you don't have electricity, you can't grow the economy. Some discussions about some of the options. Okay, so these are just some. I just want to touch on these first. So obviously, this is what we must absolutely do, non-negotiable. We've got a new CEO. I hope that he's allowed to do what needs to be done. I see he's already saying that he won't touch the staff. I think that's a problem. He's saying, so more or less, he agrees with my idea, not with me, but with the idea that breaking Eskom up is a bit stupid. But I don't think he's going to get away with it. I think government thinks that if they do that, they're going to distract a lot of us enough to forget about the problems. But the structural, fundamental problems aren't going to go away. But certainly, he's coming as as an outsider. I just hope that he gets the political support. Without the political support, and by that I mean the ANC needs to stay the hell out of the kitchen. They need to stay out of the kitchen, and they haven't, and they don't, and they're still not doing it. So I have little hope for that, I'm afraid. I hope that they stay out of the kitchen. We'll see. We have to improve that availability factor. So if that, and what I think is going to happen, I think it's a good idea. It's our only option. I think we're going to see permanent load shedding for extended period, maybe 6 months. And we'll be told, look, we can guarantee 25,000 megawatts all the time. But that means we are going to have to load shed stage 3 or stage 2 permanently for 6 months. And then we ensure that the things that we maintain are maintained, and I think it's a good idea. The added problem is, where's the money going to come from and the skills to suddenly do 6 months worth of maintenance? especially the money. But I do think we can find the money. We don't have another option. But I think that's what's going to happen. So that could improve that. The existing renewables which are there can provide some more electricity. I think I estimated about 200 megawatts very quickly if you just give them a contract. And then greater commercial and household generation, so people going away from Eskom doing their own thing, and then municipalities but that's again longer term. You're not going to see a big thing happening for at least 2 years. So renewables and which is renewable power is wind and solar largely, and hydro, but we can't do hydro. We don't have enough big rivers anymore. Our geography doesn't allow for it, and it's got its own challenges. You'll be interested to know. But renewables largely in South Africa, wind and solar. As I said, by 2030 they want 17% of our power to come from wind and about 7% from solar. Now this to give you an idea of the weekly put out electricity flow. Just to give you an idea. So more or less the red down there is nuclear. That's generated by nuclear power. You can see it's more or less stable. The brown there is coal. And then the little bits there is wind and solar, and then forget about the rest. But the point that I want to make here is look at those dips. What does that mean? That is when the sun isn't shining and the wind isn't blowing. It's as simple as that. It's as simple as that. So all the data we've got wind and believe me, I am pro renewables. I am. I do think they've got a role to play, a big role to play. They privately funded, which is a big thing, so Eskom doesn't have to fund them, and they can run independently, and they can be built very quickly. So certainly they are more environmentally friendly than fossil fuel. But I would argue they're climate friendly and not environmentally friendly. But that's a thought for another day. But certainly the generation output problem hasn't been resolved. So imagine for a moment that we've got, that is all wind and solar to right there. We'll be going here. Every night at 7 p.m. there will be no power for the whole country. The other problem with wind and solar is it fluctuates. So imagine for a moment your water is turned off in your house, or there's been a pipe burst and they close your water off. What happens when you turn it on? There's nothing coming out for a while, and then there's and then there's a whole and the whole lot of water and soil and stuff comes out of the pipes, and then it's fine. Am I right? It's more or less the same. So at times you don't have a lot of electricity generated, and at times you have a crap load. And the impact of that on the grid, on a grid that isn't meant to be managing that massive variability of the fluctuation of the electricity coming through, is enormous. And we haven't resolved that problem yet. And that's going to cost a lot of money to fix. And the other point is you're going to have these little plants dotted all around the country. How are you going to connect them all to the national grid? It's a big, in my view, a challenge. But it's being sold as the lobbying is incredible going on. Maybe I won't get into nuclear. Shall we take some questions? I think that I've reached the end of that talk. Yes, sir.
South Africa is extremely well endowed with coal-based gas. It's easily accessible. Infrastructure costs that are even less in large scale. Is anyone pursuing that?
So this is fracking. Is coal bed methane gas not fracking? But you have to frack to get it, right? Okay, I'm afraid let me pass on that one. I'm not an expert on that, but our only gas deposits, the ones that I understand where the research has been done, is you'll have to get to it with fracking, which poses a whole different bunch of environmental challenges. Gas, thanks for the question. Gas certainly is an answer for me. Again, you're going to need regional cooperation. There's so much gas that's been found in Mozambique, northern Mozambique in particular. We don't need to frack. We don't need to buy it anywhere else. We simply go to our neighbor and we say, guys, what can we do to get your gas to our country to run these coal-fired power stations off gas? Gas, also a fossil fuel, but emits about half of the CO2 emissions that coal does. So it is an option, and we've got the gas in Mozambique. But again, we're supposed to have a gas master plan. It should have come out 4 or 5 years ago. Nobody knows where it is, so we don't know what we're doing with gas. And I think it's a disgrace, frankly. Ma'am, yes, over there.
You've written about this. Have they got their sticky fingers, for instance, into fracking or Eskom?
So, no, look, at Boswasa, I think that ship is sort of sailed.